Michael Chandler had a wild debut. And of course, now there's all this hoopla about him, skipping the line for the title fight. I think it's okay to cut the line a little bit, but to potentially get a title shot as your second fight in the UFC is pretty obscene. I don't care if you're coming from Bellator or, Mount Olympus. You can skip a little, but to hop over the second half of the division just because you knocked out the number 6 guy, that's like doing anal on the second date. Like, there are levels that you have to pass and unlock before, you achieve that. And then, you have some people who were really mad that Conor was so tame. I mean, he's a dad now. Like, what do you expect? When you were 20 years old, most of you were, doing coke in a frat house and banging unsuspecting co-eds. But then you get older, you have kids, and Saturdays ain't for the boys anymore. They're for t-ball games and home improvement projects. And if you're lucky, you and your wife will have 8.5 minutes of sideways sex at some point before Monday morning. And that's life. That's what happens to most of us. Hopefully not me. They say, oh, Dustin wouldn't have beaten him if Conor was in his prime. That's like having sex with a girl, busting 30 seconds in and saying, oh, but back in the day, I could go for hours. And that's really what you should be judging me on. Oh, Conor isn't as hungry as he once was. Maybe. I mean, the guy's out there living on a yacht. He's walking around wearing a Rolex that's worth more than my life. And then you have Dustin, who's living in Coconut Creek, Florida. Broward County, Florida. Do you know how many episodes of Cops or The First 48 took place in Broward County? Do you know how many guests on the Jerry Springer show came from Broward County? Dustin could live anywhere, but he chose to live in Florida. He chose to live amongst the meth heads. And that way he's always fucking ready. Because you never know when one of them is going to strike. In my opinion, the only person who could reasonably fight Khabib at this point is, Dr. Manhattan. So someone should call up his management team and see what he's doing. I didn't realize, but Dern actually has the highest submission attempt average out of all active fighters, which is kind of crazy because she seems like, the sweetest, most innocent person you'll ever meet. If she wasn't a fighter, she'd be a kindergarten teacher. And you can't really say that about anybody else in this sport, except for maybe, Colby Covington, the Bambi of mixed martial arts. Dern asked her coach, if her nose was broken. And he was like, no, you look fine, you look great. Meanwhile, she's drowning in a river of her own nose blood. But I get it though, you don't want to psych her out. It's like when a friend of yours gets a shit haircut and they ask you how it looks, you tell them that it looks great, but in the back of your mind, you're wondering if their barber has glaucoma. Devison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. I don't even know where to begin. Figueiredo was in the hospital with a stomach infection 24 hours before the fight began. Only a non-Caucasian could pull that off. That is just not white people shit. We don't have the facilities for such endeavors. Then you have Brandon Moreno, whose body apparently was manufactured by Lockheed Martin. His chin is no doubt a military-grade weapon. He could be kidnapped by Russia or China if he's not careful. Tony Ferguson is... When Winston Churchill said, "It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma," he was referring to Tony Ferguson. I once had a betta fish that died and came back to life 3 days later. That betta fish was Tony Ferguson. Oliveira, right after the fight, put on those glasses and what looked like, like a camera around his neck. It's like, I gotta fight Ferguson at midnight, but then hit the group tour at the Hoover Dam at 1 a.m. As a quick side note, I just want to say that I really missed Rogan. I was happy to have him back. However, if he used the term slobber knocker one more time, I was going to crack my Proper 12 bottle and gouge it into my ear hole. You gotta switch up your shtick, dude. It's kind of like jerking off. 2 to 3 times is fun, but 25 to 30 times is a problem. And honestly, you shouldn't even be enjoying it at that point. It's the UFC 255 review, or as I like to call it, the Mike Perry Spectacular. God help us all. I can understand if somebody spoke Swahili, You know, when we forgot to have somebody on deck to translate that. But Portuguese, it's the native language of half the people involved in the motherfucking sport. You know, we got an island with gold toilets and a racetrack, but we don't have a translator. It just happened with Khabib, too. We got an elephant and a parade to transport him 30 feet from the hotel to the event. We moved the fight to the ass crack of dawn so it could be on at a good time in Russia. We did all of those things, and yet we didn't have a translator readily available after the fight. Also, Mike Perry's Twitter banner is a photo of his pregnant girlfriend posing next to a Mercedes that looks like it was driven through a combat zone, you know, before it got to him. It also has bronze rims, which, you know, I guess is fun. Everyone knows that guy from high school. Everybody has a guy from high school who is exhibiting the exact same behavior that Mike Perry is. What Obama is to young black children is what Mike Perry is to the guy who spent a little too much time hanging out outside 7-Eleven in high school. Mike Perry represents hope. Even after all of his craziness, Dana White said that he has no plans of cutting him, which honestly is music to my ears. I hope you never change, Mike. You're probably one of the most entertaining people in the sport. Stay bronze, pony boy. His face is like a porn star's vagina. It will take a beating time and time again, but it doesn't break and it doesn't lose its luster. He also called Dustin an inbred hillbilly, obviously not realizing that he's also insulting about a third of the UFC's fan base. Myself included, I'm 25% backwoods on my father's side. Mackenzie Dern is also a sweetheart, not to mention that her jiu-jitsu skills are crazy. You gotta wonder about her husband though, and like what he feels like going down on her. I'm sure it's a lovely time and everything, but she gets a little too excited and starts squeezing his head with those thighs. I mean, very serious injury could take place. You know, I know DC was talking about how it's really important for a fighter to address their weaknesses right after a loss and really keep their head in the game. When asked what his plans were upon returning home, Holland said that he was making a beeline for the local titty bar. And it's not like that's not a priority, but I don't think that's what DC meant when he said, go address your weaknesses. Or maybe it was. I'm not a coach. I don't know. Now, this guy is known for his striking ability, and his knockouts. So the fact that he was actually able to submit him was pretty impressive. The fact that he's a hulking 6'6" and managed to take flight in the octagon was probably even more impressive than that. On Matt Serra and Jim Norton's podcast, he was talking about how he's really into self-help books and musicals. And that's the crazy thing about UFC. It's either guys who can sing along to all of West Side Story, or it's guys who are running out of their homes with shotguns in the middle of the night to chase people off of their property. In what other league can you end the night with a money shot joke and, not get fired? I mean, what other sport are you allowed to make a joke about blowjobs and facials and not everybody is losing their job the next day? Colby goes to his post-show interview. He immediately, goes into some pro-Trump, very passionate soliloquy. And I think if you're watching close enough, you can see the exact moment that Colby ejaculates live on television because the president called him. I saw Michael Bisping tweeting like, this is kind of impressive. And I agree. I mean, normally you have to invest in Pornhub Premium to see that kind of raw content on your screen, but not in Trump's America. We're just going to give it to you for free.